And now, from the combined newsrooms of KARK4 and Fox 16, breaking news coverage.
And we continue to follow developing issues concerning the planned execution of Don Davis. Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Clausen.
I'm Donna Terrell. We've been awaiting a decision from the United States Supreme Court, and it's coming down to the wire ahead of a midnight deadline. Our co-anchors, Kevin Kelly, Ashley Ketz, are at the Cummins unit following the latest developments. Guys, what's going on? We keep hearing that a decision should be coming down real soon from the U.S. Supreme Court. Is that true?
Yeah, we're in a holding pattern yet again, but all indications, at least here at the Cummins unit, as you well know, Ashley, is it's all hands on deck. They are moving forward. The Arkansas Department of Correction officers are moving forward as if this execution will take place. And in just a short amount of time, a lot of developments have taken place behind us here.
Right, a few pieces of information we can pass on to you. We know Don Davis, the inmate scheduled to be executed tonight. We are still waiting to hear if the Supreme Court will allow that to happen. We have about 20 minutes until midnight now, so something we're watching. We do know he is in a room, in a chamber, or in a room just next to the death chamber right now. He's had some contact with his attorneys today. They would not speculate or be specific on exactly what those conversations involve. We also know that Davis's execution, if it doesn't happen tonight, it would appear, according to the governor's office, that at least according to the spokesperson's understanding, that it may not happen in the month of April. We're still waiting right now. A lot of the witnesses, the citizen witnesses that we've been reporting on now for a month, 12 of them, we know they have been moved into place. This is all just in preparation if we do get word from the Supreme Court, if they go ahead and say, go ahead and start with the execution. So something that we're going to be watching. Also, the media pool has been selected. They are moving and getting in place just in case. But Don Davis, he has not been moved. He will not be touched until that ruling comes down.
Yeah, and speaking of the media pool that has been selected, we can tell you that so far an individual from the Associated Press, as well as Arkansas Online, the Democratic Gazette, and another person from NPR have all been selected as part of the media pool. No TV stations have been selected, which may be just because of the random nature in how these individuals were selected. We did hear from the governor's spokesperson who said that they were moving the witnesses in place, which we talked about. We're anxiously awaiting the Supreme Court decision on this, and that Don Davis has not been moved or touched in any capacity at this point. That could all change in a matter of minutes, but both the governor and several other agencies reporting that even though we're 15, 20 minutes away from the stroke of midnight, there is still ample time to carry out this execution.
They've been saying this all along. Jessie Tenor is inside the media room right now. She's actually sitting in a room where there is a phone, a landline. They cannot have cell phones in there. That phone will ring if the Supreme Court lifts the stay on this execution tonight. They will get a phone call once that happens, and then the ADC will pass along that information. So that's how we're going to get that information relayed to us. It's going to be through a landline here at the prison at Cummins.
Yeah, so the situation here, both Bob and Donna, very fluid, fast moving, changing by the minute. As I mentioned at the top, the Arkansas Department of Correction officers are moving full steam ahead as if this execution will take place. But again, we are still waiting for that final decision. We'll toss it back to you in the studio.
All right, Kevin and Ashley, thanks very much. So it's one of those things where they are, you know, as they mentioned, ADC moving ahead as planned because they've got a structure in place that they've got to follow through. And I think the time estimate on once the execution process actually begins, you're looking at 20 to 30 minutes. And by protocol, I think as long as they begin before midnight, before the death warrant expires, then it will obviously carry through.
That was the point I was going to bring up, because we keep talking about a midnight deadline. That doesn't necessarily mean the execution has to be over by midnight, but it at least has to start by midnight. I did read somewhere that it's up to the governor's interpretation. One person who can really explain that very well is our very own Marcy Manley. She's been following all the legalities involving this, and certainly there have been plenty.
Well, there sure have been throughout the day. We've been updating, and this is the ultimate update, right? We've been waiting for SCOTUS's decision on this for quite a while. But there really are a lot of questions at this point as to how this process works. No one official has really been willing to say this is the timing of the execution. It must start before the execution warrant expires. And so we're sort of sitting and waiting. That's why I have the laptop up here, just trying to get updates, checking slip opinions, things like that. And really, we just don't have a lot of official word at this point. We have been told that it's the governor's discretion on how he interprets the deadline of the warrant. And if you compare that to a search warrant, if a search warrant expires at midnight, then search crews or the police can execute the search at 11:59 and then be on scene for hours. It just has to start prior to that expiration, but we haven't been able to confirm that that's actually how these execution warrants work. So a lot of things still up in the air. Aside from, sorry about that, I had a message in my ear, but aside from this decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, there's all of these other questions about the process, even if the decision were to come down from them. So at this point, witnesses are being moved and we're anticipating a decision, and all we can do at this point is wait. At this point, even the officials with the telephone sitting next to them to get the cue that either this execution is on or off don't have an answer at this point, and so we're in that same boat. And at this point, the clock keeps ticking, and it remains to be seen at what point do you not have ample time, and that is a question that we haven't been able to get answered at this point, and there are still questions as to what happens once those execution warrants expire. Earlier in the day, we were told that a clemency process wouldn't have to happen. Now we're hearing from the governor's office that actually that Don Davis would be eligible for clemency and going through a 30-day process, and so his execution date couldn't be set in April. So a lot of fluid information that we continue to follow, and right now we're waiting for that Supreme Court, that U.S. Supreme Court decision on this stay of execution that the Arkansas Supreme Court has granted to Don Davis. Of course, Bruce Ward off the table for the night completely. And everyone is watching and waiting for this decision to know how the state moves forward. Bob and Donna, back to you.
You know what, I'm going to ask you this question. Can you explain to us, and we were talking about this earlier, can you explain to us exactly what it is that the state Supreme Court ruled? Why this was not able to go forward, why this particular Don Davis execution was not able to go forward, and then that'll help us better understand what the Supreme Court, what Justice Alito is trying to decide.
Yeah, at this point, so the filing was made to Justice Alito, but we've since received word that the entire full U.S. Supreme Court is considering this decision. And so at this point, what they have to decide is if they're going to overturn the Arkansas State Supreme Court's decision to grant that stay of execution. The Supreme Court in Arkansas made that decision based on the inmates' requests saying we'd like to see the outcome of a Supreme Court case that is slated to be orally argued before the U.S. Supreme Court later this month, roughly a week away. And so in light of that, the Arkansas Supreme Court granted the stay of execution pending the outcome of this federal question, and that is the issue for the state. The state saying the Arkansas Supreme Court basically erroneously interpreted this federal question, saying it doesn't apply to Don Davis. He shouldn't have a stay of execution, and they're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn that and allow the execution to move forward. Don Davis, on the other hand, is saying this is state court's business. The U.S. Supreme Court doesn't really have any business moving in here at this point because this isn't a final order. This isn't a final resolution to a case. Rather, it's a stay, and briefing should be commenced. The case is essentially open. And so I know that gets really ticky and really complicated, but these are the type of lines that lawyers are fighting about at this point when it comes to whether Don Davis lives past today or whether he dies today.
Yeah, the minutia of all this it can be overwhelming to the layman. But Marcy, talk about the fact too that what got us here was the fact that this drug was going to, one particular drug was going to expire at the end of this month. If Davis, his stay is upheld, and then this moves to a clemency phase, and then perhaps at some point the stay is pulled, well, and then this drug expires, and then we're back at square one. Where do we go from there? I mean, this guy has been in this position several times in the past.
And that is the big elephant in the room, isn't it? That we're going through all of these steps to ultimately try and get him executed tonight. And by we, I mean the state is trying to do that. And we are now 14 minutes out from midnight and, you know, waiting on a decision when if he can't be executed in April and midazolam expires in April, then we're right back to square one, and he can't be executed. So I'm going to send it back to you. I think we've got
Marcy,
an update.
Yeah, we just heard that the decision has come. We should probably
waiting
go.
on what that decision is.
That's the question. Obviously, that landline has the phone has rang. Let's go back to Kevin Kelly and Ashley Katz. They're at the Cummins unit to see if they have heard anything.
Donna, we've been monitoring social media just like you, and literally as you guys caught wind of it, so did we. All we know at this point is that a decision is in from the Supreme Court of the United States. As to what that decision is, we aren't sure just yet. We have several crews behind the cameras on their cell phones as we speak, trying to get more information for us, but looking behind us, there's not a whole lot of information. Wait, hang on one sec. I'm being handed a phone here. Supreme Court of the United States maintains Davis's stay. It maintains
means
Davis's
no
stay.
execution right now.
No execution.
As of April 17th.
Yeah.
You know, this was the day that the state set back in February for 2 men to be executed. It was down to 1 man who still had the possibility of being put to death tonight, and right now we're learning, at least according to the Supreme Court, who has the highest authority in the land, that this will not go on as planned tonight here at Cummins.
Yeah, and Bob and Donna, you guys were talking about it with Marcy as well. Here we are 10 minutes away from the top of the hour. Think about the stress involved for the Arkansas Department of Correction officers. Granted, they were operating under the impression that an execution would take place. But when you're up against the gun like this, when you're 10 minutes away, and you still don't know what is going to be happening, that can certainly take a toll on you emotionally and even physically. But as we just learned within the last minute or so, the Supreme Court of the United States has maintained the stay for Don Davis.
Right.
So Bruce Ward and Don Davis will not be executed. No executions will take place tonight.
We're seeing a stream of cars come out. It seems as if they have received this news, you know, maybe even a couple of minutes before we did, because they have already gotten into their cars. They are filing out of the parking lot. We're seeing an ADC van, but a lot of just regular vehicles. Right now, we're not sure if these are family members, if these are citizen witnesses, if these are attorneys, who these folks are right here. It looks like
difficult to say.
Yeah, you just can't tell.
We do know that the victim's family members, Jane Daniel, who was the victim of Don Davis when he killed her roughly 27 years ago. We had learned earlier that family members and loved ones had been transferred here to the Cummins unit. Of course, they've been waiting 27 years to get some final closure.
Right.
They were brought here, unsure if they are in one of those cars there that are now leaving the Cummins unit, but imagine the emotional toll that has taken place for them yet again, considering everything they've been through.
You know, it's been 2 years. You know, there was a date set back in 2015. Here we are in 2017. Now, you know, this has been looming for a couple of months now, and we're almost to midnight. These families have been waiting all day, all month, all year, 4 years now, and the delay, once again, we'll have to move forward, and we'll learn more about what exactly this delay means for the state of Arkansas, because, again, there are executions that are set to start on Thursday, too, for other inmates.
And then you also have to wonder what is going through the mind of Don Davis. He was scheduled to be executed tonight. Now it looks like that obviously will not be taking place. So that means his execution will most likely be pushed back beyond the month of April, which means he won't be executed, at least in the near future.
Right, and at some point, you know, we could expect to see him leave. He may be transferred back to his cell on death row at the Varner unit. You know, that could happen swiftly. We'll be here to see if we see any type of action, any type of escort. But as for now,
About to speak in the next 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay.
We've just been told that the governor's office is expected to talk to the media here at the Cummins unit within the next 2 to 3 minutes. As we've been mentioning, Fox 16's Jesse Tenor inside. Hopefully, we'll catch wind of what the governor reaction is to all of this. Of course, he wanted to see this carry through and had taken all the necessary precautions and procedures, even coming out to the Cummins unit, taking a tour of it last week to make sure everything was important. And then we're also hearing that Leslie Rutledge is about to make a statement.
Right. She's worked throughout the weekend on all of these appeals and filing briefs, and her office has been working around the clock. So this is a blow to them because they were hopeful earlier in the day that these executions might take place just for the sheer fact that these sentences were carried out so many years ago, and it is the job of the state for them to carry out the law. So yeah, we can go ahead and take a look at that statement just while we just have this information.
Yeah, you guys might be might be able to okay, well, I'll go ahead and read it here if I can see it. Let's see. Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge released a statement. It goes on to say, "It is heartbreaking that the family of Jane Daniel has once again seen justice delayed. Davis was convicted of his crimes in 1992, and my office took every action it could today to see that justice was carried out. Ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court has the final say and has decided not to lift the stay at this time. There are 5 scheduled executions remaining with nothing preventing them from occurring, but I will continue to respond to my and all legal challenges brought by the prisoners. The families have waited far too long to see justice, and I will continue to make that a top priority."
That answers some of our questions.
Yes.
Right there, and you can feel her frustration in all of this because this has been a fight for the state of Arkansas.
Yeah, it certainly has. I mean, these families have been waiting 27 years. Rules are in place, so are the legal challenges, and it has been followed through up until the very, very last minute.
And again, the Supreme Court again has the 6th time. This is, well, the 6th time that his execution date. Yeah, if you think about it, the 6th time he's had an execution date come and go as an inmate on death row. And tonight we're hearing from the Supreme Court on this.
So some interesting and shocking developments depending on who you ask, but at the same time, maybe it's not so shocking depending on who you ask. But things are starting to calm down here. Again, the governor is expected to issue some type of statement, or maybe his governor, the spokesperson for the governor, is scheduled to talk to the media. We'll try and bring that to you. But Bob and Donna, some interesting developments coming up to the very top of the hour.
Yeah, stay still in place, at least for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, Kevin, you guys mentioned venting some frustration from the Attorney General and the governor's statement, which we have right here. The governor's saying tonight, the U.S. Supreme Court has declined to vacate the Arkansas Supreme Court decision in reference to Don Davis. I am disappointed in this delay for the victim's family. However, the 8th Circuit decision today overturning Judge Baker's stay and the Arkansas Supreme Court ruling vacating Judge Griffin's temporary restraining order mean that the courts have once again cleared the state to proceed with carrying out the sentences of the other inmates. While this has been an exhausting day for all involved, tomorrow we will continue to fight back on last-minute appeals and efforts to block justice for the victims' families. So that coming tonight from Governor Hutchinson. So,
and that really does answer a question that we've been asking all night, with the U.S. Supreme Court coming out with its decision, as well as the Arkansas Supreme Court before that. What does that mean for the 2 executions slated for Thursday? Obviously, their situations are different, but
every one of these things is completely different.
The governor seems to feel that they will be able to move forward with the next 2 executions.
Which I think was the feeling a week ago with these two.
With these 2 executions.
Marcy Manley standing by. Marcy, moving forward, we know that we do have one, one stay had been filed for one of the upcoming inmates. Anything in the crystal ball of an attorney can tell you what may lie down the road.
I don't think the attorneys in these cases could tell you what was coming up down the road, but there are a couple of things to note. As we reported earlier today, the ACLU has requested a motion or filed a motion to request a stay of execution for Ladell Lee. He is slated to be executed on Thursday. And as the Attorney General noted, there really is nothing standing in the way of these executions moving forward. The temporary restraining order was sort of that final barrier that was standing in place for all of these inmates, not just Ward and Davis for tonight, but sort of all of these inmates. And as you recall, that dealt with one drug in the execution protocol that Judge Wendell Griffin had barred from being used over questions of how it was secured. But when the preliminary injunction from the federal court came in on Saturday, the drug company moved to non-suit because the issue was moot. Now that federal injunction has been overturned by the 8th Circuit. The Arkansas Supreme Court has vacated that temporary restraining order, and now there really is nothing standing in the way of these executions proceeding forward. Now, there are cases that are currently open out there on the dockets that haven't had final action, that haven't had any action taken to grant any stays for any of these other inmates. And every attorney I have spoken with who has ever watched how these capital cases and sort of executions unfold say they wouldn't be surprised if Thursday could resemble Monday. Each of these inmates are going to have different issues, but just like in Ladell Lee's case, you have the question of intellectual ability and an intellectual disability. That's one claim that the ACLU is making in regard to why he should be given a stay of execution, but they're also pointing to evidence like blood and hair evidence that weren't tested for DNA, which they believe could prove his innocence in this case. So a lot of moving parts to that. Each inmate is going to have different things that they try to bring up to delay the execution or prevent it permanently or indefinitely. And so we're just going to have to wait and see how all of that unfolds. At this point, we had been focusing on Ward and Davis, and they have gotten sort of a reprieve. I was counting the words in the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States opinion, and it was 35 words. 35 words has now appeared to have secured another 30 days alive for Don Davis. And you think about the power of the judiciary and how that power of ascendancy and top-down review works. And so many hours spent addressing that question, the court considering the state's request to issue an order of 35 words that now gives Don Davis, at least it would appear, another 30 days at life. It's not clear at this point whether other inmates will have that same opportunity.
Yeah, and we will only know in the coming days, and it's Thursday. Thursday is the next day where 2 other men will face the death penalty. And like Marcy said, every case is different. Every case is different, and they use all different tactics, their attorneys anyway, as to, how they're going to approach it.
And talking about approaching that, you've got to give personnel and staff down at the Department of Correction, all the credit in the world, because they approach these things with the utmost professional manner. A long night for them, Kevin and Ashley, and it will be a long week for them, but they certainly will begin again, and they will start with professionally going through the protocol of doing this, not doing it haphazardly, not saying we've been here before now we know what to do, but they will go through the, I guess you could say, through the book on how to set these things up and head forward. And just because this happened this time doesn't mean they can take any time off.
Well, this is true. And it can be very, very stressful. Kevin and Ashley, you were referring to the stress, the families dealing with the stress of having to go through this whole process, but also you have to look at the staff that has to carry it out.
Yeah, and that you bring up a good point, Bob and Donna. Think about it this way: as we now hit the stroke of midnight, this was a very real rehearsal that never came to fruition because of the Supreme Court's ruling, but for the officers and the guards and all of the staff involved, the volunteers, the media as well.
Us included.
Us included. Quite an intense rehearsal unfolding, especially since we've been here in the early hours. I mean, we've been here all day.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, the state hasn't done this since 2005. A lot of the protocols have changed, so there's a lot of newness, but But today, a lot of questions were answered. I'm sure they ran into a lot of things where they realized we may need to make some changes. They working out some kinks in the whole process because there are a lot of moving parts involved in this. So that's something that as we move forward to Thursday, we'll be learning more and hopefully get some more answers tomorrow, maybe even tonight when Jesse is able to come out and speak with us about what all has gone on inside the Cummins unit as they have, awaited to do the very first execution in the state since 2005.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me one bit if tomorrow morning prison officials, the Arkansas Department of Correction all sit down and review the procedures that were in fact employed tonight as they awaited that ultimate decision from the United States Supreme Court to see if everything went according to plan, if everything went according to their protocols. But okay, Fox 16's Jessie Tennor just coming out of the media room, running with her laptop in her hand. We'll see if we can pull her over here momentarily. But what a rehearsal for everyone involved. And of course, it'll most likely be reviewed in the coming hours and or at least over the next day before the next execution.
That's right, and Jesse has had a front row seat to all of this, along with reporters from all over the state, the country, even the world that have been inside the prison all day long, Jesse.
Most definitely, and I'm sorry, the reason why I ran out here was because I ran out of service for Twitter. I've been pretty good about tweeting and keeping up with everything, but so I wanted to bring you some updates that I've been trying to tweet out on my laptop, because that's how it works in there.
That's right.
So J.R. Davis, who is the spokesman for the governor, did just say that this means that both Ward and Davis's executions will not happen before the drug expires at the end of April.
Which is April 30th, yeah, the end of the
Correct.
month, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
so it will not happen at the end. It will not happen.
So for them, I mean, they have to be, breathing a sigh of relief tonight. You can only imagine how their legal teams are feeling coming out of this day that was supposed to be a very historic day for the state of Arkansas.
Exactly, and he did confirm. We've been going kind of back and forth with JR about what this means for the process, but he says that it is now his understanding that this starts the entire process over again.
Okay.
For Ward and Davis.
For Ward and Davis. Walk us through how this all went down. I understand there was like a telephone there. Did the phone actually ring, and this was a phone call from the United States Supreme Court?
So the phone did not actually ring.
Okay.
It sounded, the ADC spokesman actually ran out of the room, and I assumed that he took a call from somebody there, and then he came back in and said that, gave the decision that, it would not happen tonight.
Who got word first? I'm wondering how it was trickled down to what we were able to tell people at home tonight.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was monitoring on Twitter before my service went down. And the spokesman for the AG's office, Judd Deere, who's been great about tweeting everything out, he had it out first before we knew.
That's what we saw, as well as back in our studio.
Yeah, and so they had the word first. Definitely.
And as far as the families, the citizens who were going to be able to witness a potential execution tonight, have they already left the prison tonight? We saw a stream of cars come out. We just weren't sure.
I'm not sure if they've officially left yet, but I do know that that the families of both victims were here tonight.
Was there any word or indication that Davis, who was just literally, a walk away from the chamber, has now been transferred back to the Varner unit?
No word yet. I don't know if he's been transferred. They might actually be talking about that in there right now. We do have a camera in there, so we'll make sure to keep you updated as best as possible. But something that I thought was interesting, the 3 media witnesses came back in, and they kind of described the process. They said that they were put into a van, and it was really hard to see. They were driven, I think, just a little bit around a fence, and they were following another van that they thought was probably filled with other witnesses, and they said that all of a sudden the driver just stopped. They didn't say why, and they turned around.
Interesting.
So they got the call and just turned around.
Okay.
Wow, so they didn't even get to the point of getting into their seats where they would witness a possible execution.
And the witnesses were just saying it was very dark. We didn't really know a whole lot going on, and then all of a sudden the van was turning around, and here we are.
We were talking earlier about how this was kind of a rehearsal in some respects as we were all waiting. With you being inside the media room, seeing all of this unfold, did you get a sense that it seemed relatively calm, that things were moving smoothly and according to plan?
It did seem relatively calm. It was kind of eerie, 30 minutes leading up to this, it was very quiet, silent for the first time in the media room. And you could just tell that the only thing we were waiting on was that Supreme Court decision, and the rest was ready to go either way.
Okay. Jesse Tenor, thank you for those insightful, great updates, especially considering that we didn't have access to what was going on there. But
Exactly.
good job
I'll try
running.
to keep everybody updated on Twitter.
Good job.
You've done a great job.
Yeah, great job. Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you.
And we want to remind folks again, Mark, if you could remind us, Liddell Lee and Stacey Johnson are still on the schedule for executions Thursday night. Again, the schedule goes as 7 and 8:15. We're not sure which inmate has been scheduled first. I don't even believe that's been announced yet, but something that we will learn in the coming day at least.
And as we've been talking about, as of this moment, nothing appears to be standing in the way for those executions to take place. So it seems at this point in time that we could be out here once again Thursday night doing this same situation and watching it unfolding, possibly though with a different outcome. We'll toss it back to you guys in the studio.
Okay, all right, you guys, thanks a lot for that. Just for clarification, though, with Liddell Lee, the ACLU has filed a motion for a stay of execution. We haven't heard anything in terms of Stacey Johnson and if the same will happen for him. And as Marcy was telling us while they were talking, there are still some other legal issues that could happen. So we
all
don't
there,
know
yeah.
how it's going
What's
to
going to happen.
end.
But we know
We
how
just don't know.
this evening ended the way it did. And as was mentioned earlier, that the condemned, breathing a sigh of relief, but you got to think some family members back there, choking back another group of batch of tears and sighs because they had hoped justice would be done for them tonight. It was not. They will have to go through this entire process all over again. So
Yes,
their
but
pain
not
and suffering continues.
not in the month of April.
No, at
And
least
so,
that's
and then
what
there are issues with the drug and the expiration and all of that. So anyway, we're going to wrap it up from this end. We are appreciative that you stayed up with us tonight to watch our continuing coverage of Arkansas executions. Of course, as we've mentioned, we'll be back here again doing the same thing on Thursday.
And we will have a full wrap-up tomorrow on KRK4 News and, of course, Fox 16.
Absolutely. Fox 16 News at 5:30 and 9. So long, everybody.